Hi there, and welcome to our overview of the Neighbourhood Profiler tool. What we have here today is the tool, and what we're going to do is walk through how you would populate the Neighbourhood Profiler tool and show a few examples. So what I have here is the training example, and as we click into the configure sheets, the first we'll look at the geography. So in the geography we have 4 different areas. So for example, this might be a force that has 4 different PCUs, and as you see here we've got Alford, Baldwich, Copperton, Deeside. So fictitious example, but looking at 4 areas of geography. We then define different tier types. So in this we look at the different ways in which we would break down the importance of activities. So generally we would look to have an essential, so that's something that we're legally obligated to do. And then as we go down, the importance decreases. So we've got essential, important, core upper, core lower, and then discretionary. So discretionary is really things that could be done but don't need to be done. And then a final catch-all for enhanced. So that would be things that currently aren't done but in the future should be done, and it would give us a way of putting that type of activity into the tool. Capability types, generally these would be the streams of work, so thinking about the different types of capabilities within the neighbourhoods teams. So here we have problem solving, engaging community, other policing and admin. As it's a training example, we're trying to keep it relatively simple, but you may have other capabilities such as safeguarding, protecting the public, quite a few. So most forces would have somewhere between 6 and 10 on these. Into the resource types, so the ability to specify different types of resource. So looking here, we have PCs, PCSOs, the current FTE in terms of the number of officers, full-time equivalent, an annual cost of each resource. In this case we've got a £30,000 cost associated with a PC, 20,000 for a PCSO. These would obviously change depending on the different forces. However, the ability to put that cost in there, that data tends to come from finance, and we put some nominal costs in to start off with. The paid hours per year, so we've got 40 hours a week for a PC times 52, and 37.5 times 52 for the PCSO. Slightly different hours. However, when we look at the functioning hours, that equates to about the same, and we'll come to that later on where the functioning hours comes from. Loss types, so obviously officers are paid for maybe PCs will be paid for 40 hours a week. However, as a force you won't get 40 hours productive per week, so you will have things like sickness, annual leave, training, breaks and other tasks that should be taken into account. We'll skip over delivery. So delivery is just the way in which the work comes in. On the budget side of things, we then look at the current FTE. So how many officers do we have assigned to as PCs in Alford, PCSOs in Alford. So in total we have 97 PCs and 198 PCSOs. A nominal budget there that's been put in at £8 million. And the budget here can be specified as whatever you want it to be, but it will have an impact on the priority-based budgeting. Supervision, so in some cases forces may say actually we're not going to model the sergeants, but we may put a cost of supervision in, and that can be applied. On the right hand side here we have the less than and above. So basically what we're saying here is that when we come to the prioritized list within the priority based budgeting tool, anything where the cumulative cost is less than 80% of the total budget, that activity will be coloured green. Anything between 80 and 100% will be coloured orange, and anything greater than 100% will be coloured red as being out of budget. So that's all the configuration side of things in terms of how we configure the Neighbourhoods Profiler tool. In terms of the activity analysis, we'd have a bunch of tasks. Now the tasks start off from the task capabilities. So these were defined and can be selected from a drill down. So as you saw previously in the configuration, we had the 4 different task capabilities, and these capabilities are broken into sub-activities. So lower level, we've got problem solving. Problem solving is broken down into the evaluation of problem solving approaches and high visibility targeted patrol. In terms of engaging community is looked at as investigating crime in ASB and prevention of crime, whereas the other policing and admin map 1-to-1. So a very simple example here, but showing how the capabilities would be broken down into the different tasks. Looking at the activity results, this gives us a grid in which we would look to paste the annual working hours that would be achieved on each of these tasks. So generally there's a bit of work to be done here, taking the activity analysis that you've done. Typically that's 2 to 3 weeks worth of samples that may be given. That needs to be aggregated up and factored to take into account of the number of hours that would be used by officers in this area across a year. So that's for PCs. What we do is we put the right numbers in here, we then save and move along and do the same thing with PCSOs. On the resources piece, we would sort out the abstractions. So there's ability to apply different levels of abstraction to different types of officer. So what we have here for the PC, and we go into, say, with annual leave, the PC in this case gets 210 hours a year of annual leave. So we double click onto, it's called annual leave, and double click onto the cell here. It allows us to input the figure 210 and say it's per hour, 210 hours per year. Alternatively, we might want to say it's not based on hours, it's based on a proportion of time on shift. So in this case, if I reset this one, we've got 11.1 as the value, it's 11.1 percentage, and it's being used only on the shift time. So different ways of applying the abstractions. Save that, move over, do something similar for the PCSOs. What that does is it applies you've got the original paid hours, it applies the abstraction to give you your lost hours and giving available hours. So these are the hours that would be productive. So as you can see here, we've got 36% or 35.9% abstraction for the PC and 31.71 for the PCSO, but they give, in this case, we've got the same available hours, which just helps with keeping things consistent. There's another report in there where we can see how the proportions of losses. Moving on to scenarios. In the scenario section, we have tasks. So in a baseline model, and that's what we would start off by making, what we'd have is the task here, so the task being evaluating the problem solving approaches, sits under the problem solving capability, and at this point we just want to link to the activity analysis. So within the activity analysis we had something called evaluate problem solving approaches. By doing that, it then populates the number of hours. So in this case it's 92,500 hours. That's populated and applied across. So for each of these I've just gone through and selected the relevant activity analysis, and by doing this it changes. So in this one, if we said actually admin, as you can see the hours would change there. In this case that would be wrong. We want to apply the other policing activity. So first check here would be that the number of hours here, the sum of that is 392,822, and if we were just to check in the activity analysis results, the first one is 263,675, 263,657. So I can do equals sum. And if I copy and paste special that as a value, that's for PCSOs, and for the PCs we get a similar number, a similar approach. The total there being 392,822. So when we apply this into the scenario tasks, the number we expect to see as the cumulative here, so just doing that check to see the numbers here, should be 392,822. So what we see there is that the activity analysis numbers at the start have followed through. We haven't gained or lost any hours there, and that's just a good check as we go through. In terms of the priorities are set based on the set of workshops normally that are done with officers. So in many cases this will be sergeants, inspectors or chief inspectors who set the priorities of different tasks. Now what we tend to do is start off with split. So we would look and say, of the work that is done in evaluating problem solving approaches, of all the tasks that are done there, what proportion are viewed as essential, what proportion important, core upper, core lower, discretionary and enhanced. So in these workshops we normally sit down with the officers, very much look to see what are the activities, what are they actually doing at this time during this time, and trying to split that down into the relative importance of that. So once that's done, that normally is the first workshop, and then from that we would then do the priorities. So that's saying that with a ranking of 1 being the least important and 10 being the most important, how would these compare? So for example, the other policing activity in here, anything that's an essential other policing activity would be viewed as an 8.5, and then as we go down the priorities the score deteriorates down. So typically that would be something like scene guards or cell watches, and say actually we're almost mandated to do, we have to do them as SNT. As a result they score very high. So that exercise is done. We then move on to the concept of drivers. So there's two things can be done with drivers. You can, drivers are ways of allocating the activity and the time associated with the activity across the different geographical areas. Now you can do this with the activity analysis, and that would be fair enough, and that's certainly something we would do within the baseline. And there's also an approach that says, well actually we could do this not necessarily on what we're currently doing, i.e. the activity, but actually based on the demand. And by able to do, what we can do is to define as many drivers as you want within reason. We'll go down to about 100. You can define these drivers and say actually for example, you may say investigation of crime in ASB shouldn't be done based on how we currently do it, but instead based on the number of prolific offenders. So as an example here, if 60% of the prolific offenders within the county happen to be in Alford, then perhaps we'll be looking to apply this as a driver against investigating crime in ASB and put more resource to the Alford area, reducing the resource requirements in the other areas. So that's the first sheet on drivers. This is setting the proportions around them. What we then need to do is to be able to assign drivers. So that's the next sheet. And in the next sheet what we have here is a drop down for each of the capabilities and what's called drivers. So for each tier, and be able to click on these to say actually the driver for the essential problem solving, evaluating problem solving approaches, we are going to use the activity analysis of evaluating problem solving approaches. At this point it's a one-to-one mapping when we're creating a baseline, and it looks relatively straightforward. What we may want to do in the future though is to you could change that and say, okay, I want to use something else, i.e. prolific offenders. So we won't do that just now, but it's something that we may do in future scenarios. So I'll set that back to where it should be. Task to resource. Now, task to resource is the allocation between the roles of PC, PCSO. So as we saw in the FTE example earlier, far more PCSOs than we have PCs. So of all the work that's been done in problem solving, a lot more has been done by, and in fact 72% has been done by PCSOs and only 27% by PCs. Now this works just now because it's using the activity analysis. However, we could turn that off and say actually we want 100% of the problem solving evaluation of problem solving approaches to be done by PCs. Certainly some forces have looked at this and said, well, we want to use this type of approach to mandate that PCs do the activities that require the warranted powers, whereas PCSOs would do more on visibility and patrol type thing. So certainly an option around here of turning off the activity analysis and using a different split. Task to when, that allows you to put time profiles in. At the moment I'm just putting a 24/7 time profile in. However, there will be instances where you want to apply a different profile of when the work needs to be done. So for example, one of the key things an SNT might do is work with the likes of the social workers and other partner agencies. So if the partner agencies only work Monday to Friday 9 to 5, then we want to be able to show that weekdays 9 to 5 would be the profile of when the activity must occur. So we need to be able to do that. Those are specified in the configure delivery stream, and you would set what these profiles look like. So on to back to scenarios and summary. So by doing the summary, we now have a view of all of the essential, important, core upper, core lower, and enhanced activity with allocated hours associated with them. So just as a quick check, what I've done here is to have summed all of the PC hours, all of the PCSO hours. If I add that together, what we should see is that number coming back as 392,822. So once again, I'm happy that the numbers in the end that's coming through the model are the same as the original inputs. From this, we can then move to the reports. The report section starts off with hours and cost. So the hours and cost just shows us the different tiers and how they've been applied. We can move on to the cost analysis. On the cost analysis sheet, we have a prioritized list. So in the hours and cost, it talked about the hours that have been applied. Here we very much look at cost, and all of the tasks have been assigned and prioritized so that the top priority task comes first. So priority here of the other policing activity at 8.5, and as we drop down the priority number, so as the score reduces, what you see is each of the activity where there is a cost involved, the cumulative or running total increases. It starts off at green, and as we get closer and closer to our budget, it becomes orange. And if it had been over the budget, it would go red. So here we've got a list here of, once again it is fictitious, but we start off with 8.5. Anything towards the lower end, we would say would be in danger, as it was potentially not a priority for this force. So that's the cumulative or priority-based budgeting costing and how that's done. If we move on to the FTE to see how would we allocate our resources, what you see here for PCs, we start off with PCs, 97 PCs and 198 PCSOs, giving us 295. The variance we see on the bottom, we started off with 295 officers, we still have 295 officers allocated, so the variance there is 0. What you will see is the totals for each geographical area as 0, and also the by grade there'll be zeros. We do see some variation between the PC and PCSOs within an area, and that's due to the variance between the way in which the geographical area activity analysis compared with the overall force-wide number. So what we see here is that in this situation, for the base model, the numbers are 0, 0, and that just shows that we've allocated the resource in the right manner for the baseline. In our next video, we'll look at what happens when we start to assign drivers, and then in our third video, we'll look at different scenarios that can then be applied. Hopefully that's been helpful. If you do have any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.